Hello beautiful people and welcome to another video. In this one I'll be working on this old science lab bench. At least this is what I think it is. It does say lab on the top. Someone just wrote it with a pen. As you can see, it's in a pretty rough condition and it will require a lot of work. I couldn't get the screws out, so I sprayed them with some WD-40. And it didn't really help, so I had to find a different way. Because I'm actually doing this project for myself and I know I'm going to change the handles, I didn't mind getting rid of them. The guy that I got this from couldn't really tell me much about this and he wasn't sure what it was, but there was no top, so I knew I had to make one. And as you can see, the bottom was completely rotten and was disgusting. If this really was a science lab bench, I imagine that the rot comes from years of mopping and water damage, and I knew this was beyond rescue, so I just cut it off. This cabinet had a very unusual size. It was very deep, so not very useful for household furniture. So I decided to make something for myself, and I still don't know if I'm gonna keep it in my workshop or put it in my house, but use it as storage for my tools. This project took much longer than expected because many things went wrong with it, as you will see in a minute. This bench had substantial woodworm damage and a lot of rot, so I took the back off and I replaced it. I used the woodworm treatment spray on the sides, and though they were really bad, I decided to keep them because I knew that I would cover them in a minute. Unfortunately, the plywood that this bench was made from was just so dirty and so damaged that there was no way to sand it to make it look okay. So I knew I would have to stain it or do something with it eventually because I was keeping this for myself and I didn't want to replace all the bottoms and everything else. It just wasn't worth it. What I'm doing here, I'm just sanding this piece of wood flush with the plywood just because I'm going to apply veneer on this whole side.
$2,000 later.
As you saw at the beginning, there was a chunk of wood missing, so I repaired it. I recently purchased a new Benzo from Lumberjack, so this was a perfect opportunity to give it a test. And if I do sound like I have a lisp, it's because I had a recent oral surgery and I've got a big hole in my upper mouth, so sorry. Have I mentioned I got a new fancy Benzo? So I decided to cut my own veneer. Actually, not veneer, more like boards, something in between. So I had this piece of wood, but because it was really badly cracked, only the middle section was usable. So I didn't have enough to work with, and I had to make the boards thin enough to have enough, but thick enough so I could actually do something with them if I needed to, as in put it through the thicknesser. So this is where things went wrong. That's all the wood that I had to work with, and I didn't know how dry it was, and I didn't have a moisture content meter, so I kind of took a risk, and I knew there was a high chance of having all sorts of problems, but I did it anyway. So I cut it into a semi-thin pieces to use it kind of like veneer, but very thick one. And as expected, they warped quite a lot as soon as I finished cutting them, but I kind of knew that would happen. So I glued them onto a piece of plywood and it just didn't work. To make a long story short, I just wasn't happy with the way it looked and I just decided to scrap this whole idea. But let's look at the positive side. I'll never do it again. And lesson learned. And I could edit it out and make it look as if it never happened, but that's not what this channel is all about. I want to share my mistakes and my successes with you guys, and I want you to know that I'm not perfect and I make lots of silly mistakes, so don't feel bad if you do. As you can see, I tested oxalic acid on the shelf, but it didn't really do much, so I didn't use it on the rest of the piece. And as you can see, I use my Japanese pull saw to cut off the excess piece of wood on the repair that I made. And as always, I wanted to say a huge thank you to all of you wonderful and generous people for all of your support and for buying me coffees via Buy Me a Coffee or using the super thanks button or using my links in the description. That means a lot and it helps a lot, and thank you. After thinking for a little bit what to do about the top, I decided to use my walnut veneer that I had quite a lot of and apply it to pretty much the whole bench. You can use contact cement to do it, but I use just regular glue. I apply it and I let it dry, and then I use my iron to reactivate it, and it works really well for me. I didn't film it, but I normally just spray the surface with water to check for any bubbles and imperfections. And apparently, after hearing about my epic failure, the friendly neighborhood cat came to cheer me up a little bit. But mainly just to get a snack. She probably doesn't even like me. After all the sanding and cleaning, the plywood still looked pretty crappy and I wasn't happy with it. So I decided to use water-based wood dye and to give it some color and make it look a bit better. And because I was keeping this for myself, I was perfectly happy with this. As you can see, it made a big difference and I was quite happy with it. And it was good enough for me. When everything was dry, I used varnish and I sprayed a couple of coats just to protect it and make it easier to clean. And this is the lovely top that I mentioned before, which was an epic failure. I removed the whole thing and I started from scratch. Fortunately, I had enough veneer left to cover the top, so that's what I did. Because there were many drawers and I wanted the grain to match, so I numbered all of them and I did it in a way so it would look like it was all cut from one piece of veneer. Somehow, every time I think I've got a project that's gonna be pretty straightforward, it takes forever and everything just goes wrong. To make my life a bit easier, I use a router with a trim bit and went over all the drawers to cut off the excess veneer. Just so you guys know, I might be doing some extra videos pretty soon, maybe a bit shorter than my regular videos, but I have a couple of projects that I want to do and I hope you like them. To make the new top, I used two pieces of plywood. I didn't have one piece that was large enough, and I used my double doweler and dowels to align those pieces and to make sure that they wouldn't move. And the double doweler from Triton, it's not the most precise machine, so don't get one. I used my iron and repeated the same process to apply the veneer to the top. Here I'm just spraying the clear coat as I've already mentioned, and I also cut a piece of plywood with oak veneer and I use my nail gun to attach it to the back of the bench. In order for the back to match the rest of the bench, I used walnut stain and I applied it to the plywood. And I use my track saw to cut the top to its final size. And because I wanted the veneer to have a nice and clean edge, I use my new blade on my utility knife to score it, and this way when I went over it with the track saw, it left a very nice and smooth cut. I used walnut toner on the frame, but it didn't look right, so I actually changed it off camera later on, and you will not see the result until you see the final photos, so don't worry about it, just ignore it. And I also attached walnut legs with brass tips, and because I haven't decided where I'm going to put this bench, I might change them to casters, so we'll see how it goes. I didn't have any veneer left for the inside of the door, so I used lacquer toner and it actually looked quite okay. After some final sanding and cleaning, I took care of the hinges because they were actually in a decent condition, so they just needed a bit of a TLC. And I tried something for the first time. I actually used lacquer toner and gold spray paint, and it actually gave me a very nice color. I also wanted to reuse the screws, so I used rust remover to clean them up. I put everything together and I applied clear coat to the entire piece, sanding in between with 800 sanding sponges just to get rid of anything that would stuck in, freshly sprayed lacquer. And just ignore the color of the frame, as I said, because I changed it off camera, so the final results will be a bit different. As always, if you guys enjoyed the video, subscribe and like for more content like this. It's completely free and it helps us YouTubers a lot. This might be one of the most luxurious workshop cabinets ever, and I just need to decide what I want to do with it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and see you next time.